Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is Secret U.S. Alien Moon Base. Before we get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you'd like to support the work of this channel, you can do so on Patreon. When you join, you get advanced episodes on Sunday, library of downloaded episodes for your podcast app, a Patreon email where we can talk back and forth, and there's a new chat room now for patrons, as well as a personal IM message back and forth in Patreon as well. And if you're interested, you'll find a link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you'd like a lesson to astral project, be more than glad to work with you. All you have to do is just go to the description, and there's an email there, and request information. And I'll send it along to you, along with a recent recommendation that I got from a past student who was luckily able to project 10 days after a class with me after having read and studied for 7 months. Okay, yesterday I told my wife that I was thinking of going back to the moon because I haven't done that in a long time. It was my first space trip when I was a young teen. I saw the big moon in the sky, and I thought I'd love to go there. First couple times, though, I failed because I took off like a rocket. I experienced fear, and I was forced back into my physical body. But eventually, I got the hang of it, was able to suppress the fear, and I remember my first trip to the moon. It was wonderful. I acted kind of like the astronauts that I saw on television, taking those big leaps around the moon. It was fun. I didn't really do anything all that interesting, but heck, I had a fun time. Since then, of course, I've been to a lot of other places in our galaxy. However, I haven't been back to the moon in a little while. And I thought, well, let's do that again, and just go back there for old home's sake. So, left my body and saw the moon up there in the sky, and of course, willed myself to the moon. I took off like a rocket, which of course I expected to. Suppress the fear, which by now is pretty much under control, but it's still lurking there sometimes like a small animal hiding from a predator. But I did something that often happens, I think, to astral projectors when they project into space. Sometimes it's a little hard to control the brakes. Once you get going, it can be sometimes hard to stop. I recall once I wanted to travel, I believe, to Mars, and I took off so fast that I ended up outside of our galaxy looking in. So it was, I was like, wow, the brakes totally failed on this one. Now I didn't quite, my brakes didn't quite fail as much this time, but I ended up inside the moon, which, as anyone who's been listening for a while knows, typically I have a fear of closed in spaces. So it's not something I generally do. Oh, I'll project into space and time and all the rest of that, but going into ground is a little bit of a fear of mine. But when I stopped, and I did manage to stop, I found myself not in the middle of, rock and what have you. I found myself in an enormous open chamber. In that chamber was filled with spacecraft. Looking around, I was able to see 3 what I would consider mother craft. They were enormous. Alongside them and around them, filling the rest of this enormous chamber. And it was extremely difficult for me to try to figure out how big it was. it was so big that unless I used my astral vision, I wouldn't be able to see the other end of it. That's how big this chamber was. And I don't know whether it's natural or whether it's been excavated, but there were many hundreds of smaller scout craft all around. They were flying saucer in shape. And they look very much like some of the craft that I saw on the Air Force Base in an episode that I published a while back on Astral Club, where I went into a secret Air Force hangar, and that's when I saw two spacecraft, which were scout craft size, and I saw a cylindrical craft as well. And just as an aside, I just saw on the news last night that a passenger who was landing, circling, getting ready to land at JFK Airport, had her phone recording, the city. And something flashed by very quickly in essentially 1/7 of a second. If it had been moving any quicker, she probably wouldn't have been able to actually see it. But when she actually slowed down her video of it, there's a cylindrical craft. And it looked very much like the cylindrical craft that I saw alongside those two scout craft in that Air Force Base hangar in that episode. So that definitely bolstered my opinion. I think there's as much chance that those craft are being operated by Americans as much as aliens. At any rate, though, let's get back to the main story. So here I am in somewhere inside the moon in this enormous open chamber with all these spacecraft essentially hovering. I didn't see anything that looked like actual mooring, but they were all hovering in this chamber. Now there were some walkways below, and I decided to get closer to see if I could see exactly who they were. I saw almost immediately that there were some familiar aliens that I had seen before at the bottom of the ocean in the Gulf of Mexico. I believe we usually called them Pleadians. They were tall, thin, good-looking humanoids. If you looked farther enough away, they would look very human. As you get a little bit closer, you could see some alien characteristics. But they, essentially, there was women and there were males. The females, they all had blonde hair. The females were about 6 to 7 feet tall, which for our metric friends is 183 to about 213 centimeters tall. They reminded me kind of like Uma Thurman, the movie actress. If I had to pick a human to play a female Pleiadian, Uma Thurman would be the person I would pick. I also saw males. The males are taller. They were about 8 to 9 feet tall, or about 244 to 274 centimeters tall. Most of them were dressed in silver, close-fitting silver suits, like one-piece jumpsuits. But there were some that had on what looked like a white shirt and a white pair of pants, but I couldn't see where they began and ended. Like I couldn't see openings. There wasn't zippers or any visible signs of where one garment ended and the other began. It just, they looked like that. And these had gold ribbons or piping on their uniform, which I estimated was probably some sort of indication of rank. And perhaps the ones in the silver jumpsuits were lower ranking crewmen. That certainly is always, certainly I was very surprised to see that. But what really shocked me is I saw good old garden variety humans walking around as well. I assumed they were Air Force because they were wearing Air Force camouflage uniforms. I got closer, and with Pleiadians and humans, I wasn't afraid to get closer because I've never been seen by either the Pleiadians or, of course, humans. So with these aliens, I have the luxury of getting as close as I want. So I got in close and landed on this walkway, and a couple of humans walked right by me. One was wearing sergeant stripes, and another one was wearing master sergeant stripes. But it was different, though. They had what looked to me like the Star Trek triangle in the middle of the stripes. And I thought, what the heck? But then as I got a better look at the uniform, because there was a number of humans walking around, I saw it said United States Space Force. So when I returned to my body, I looked up the uniforms for the new Space Force. And the Space Force, if you haven't heard of them, they're a new branch of the military. They've got about 14,000 active members right now, according to Wikipedia. They're a subsection of the Air Force, much like the Marines are a subsection of the Navy. So, I'd never seen that uniform before because, of course, I got out of the Air Force a long time ago and there was no such uniform. So, if you're wondering what this Space Force is up to, evidently this is one of the things they're up to. They are actively cooperating with these Pleadians. I tried to read the minds of a female and a male Pleiadian as they walked by, and I couldn't quite do it. Their thoughts and brains, even though they kind of look human, they're organized in a different way. And I couldn't quite tune into the frequency. It was kind of like if you've ever fiddled with an old radio that has the dial where you're trying to dial in a radio station. You kind of get in between where you're hearing a little bit of one radio station, some static, and maybe a little bit of another one, but you can't really make out exactly what's being said. That's what reading their minds was like. So I went ahead and just scanned some of the airmen. I don't know if that's what the Space Force calls them. That's what the Air Force calls them. Well, whatever. The information I got is they were some sort of specialist, whatever. And when I scanned their minds, they were very much on task. They were there for 6-month to 1-year tours. So I imagine there's probably some sort of fake backstory they tell their relatives as to what's going on, where they are. And they're there as part of an agreement with the Pleiadians to maintain this particular base. One of the staff sergeants was very much into to data programming, and another one was more of a supervisor. I think that was the master sergeant, whose job it was to ensure the maintenance of his section of the station. And for them, it was very much a job. I could sense, of course, their excitement in the background of being part of this very select group of people. I also sensed that they had gone through quite a bit of examinations, both psychologically and physically, to get this particular job. I then tried to dig even deeper as to what the purpose of all this was. And apparently, we've got some sort of an agreement, the U.S., and I assume maybe our allies too, I don't know, with the Pleiadians that we allow them to have this base in the moon. Apparently, they're nice enough to ask, which which is nice. It's always nice to be asked. And we said yes as long as we did this as a joint type mission. It's designed for the security of the Earth. I sense that the threats it wasn't aimed towards earthly threats. It was aimed towards other alien threats, in that the Pleiadians were there working with us. I know they were getting something out of it too. I believe there was an exchange of some of our raw materials that they require for their ships, that and perhaps their homeworld. I was trying to get this out of humans, and the humans that I scanned were a little sketchy on the details. And as I said, I was unable to scan the Pleiadians. So evidently, it's a joint type of a situation where they're getting something out of it, and we're getting something out of it. And so far, I guess it seems to be a mutually beneficial relationship. I couldn't help but decide to go into one of the motherships. There was no force field or anything like there was at the bottom of the ocean, so I didn't have to get through any kind of force field. There was airmen, humans, who were walking in and out of this space, and it was odd because what would happen is the human would go to this platform, and he'd stand there on this platform, and then the platform, the square part of it, would detach and ferry the human over to the particular mothership in this case. I just kind of tagged along, and when it docked, the human just walked right in, and I walked right in behind him and got a chance to look around. And it was an enormous craft. I would imagine that it had the kind of space that one of our aircraft carriers have, only inside. All of the instrumentation. I didn't see I didn't see buttons or levers or anything like that. It seemed to be a very minimalistic type of situation. I saw Pleiadians who were busily working at their stations, doing something. Their fingers are very long and very thin, and they're very pale. I think they could use some sun. And they were busily working over the instrument panel, not touching it, but working above it and maneuvering things. So evidently, their control panels worked without having to be touched. And meanwhile, there were humans walking about too, performing a variety of tasks as well. It was quite an experience. I could feel that there was an energy pulsing through the ship, and it reminded me of the energy that I felt in the scout craft, the one that was alive, not the dead one, if you remember back to that episode. And it felt alive. It felt like I could sense there was thought. It almost was like the craft itself was thinking and was alive. And for a second, I got paranoid. I wondered, might it sense me and take some sort of an action? Luckily, though, my paranoia was not rewarded. because nothing happened that indicated anyone knew that I was there. Unfortunately, at about this time, I started getting that darn return signal, and I was pulled right back out of the moon into my body. So we have an agreement with the Pleadians. We've got evidently a joint base in the interior of the moon. I don't know if the whole moon is hollow. I know there's been rumors about that over the years, but I know there's at least one gigantic open space inside the moon that conceals an enormous amount of these alien craft. If you thought that was interesting, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds, subscribe if you haven't already, and questions and comments, please. What do you think about all of this? Have you heard about bases inside the moon before? Do you know anything more about the Pleadians? I don't consider myself an expert on them. I know a lot more about the Greys, for instance. But any information you have or any further questions that you have, I'd be glad to answer them, and I'm sure everyone else will be glad to read them as well. As always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.